So I'm going to be talking about microbiome insights across species for one medicine. As Joe said, I am currently working as the head of science and research for Biome 9, and that role also spans across to working as head of microbiology for Pooch and Mutt. But as well as that, I've also done quite a lot of human research as well, including looking at the microbiome and metabolome of obese pediatric patients from the Norfolk and Norwich University Hospital. And then prior to my current work and my PhD, I was working in immuno-oncology and did a lot of work in comparative oncology. So my work has spanned across animal and across human research. And being a zoologist and being passionate about animals, I am constantly looking for that shared biology and that shared opportunity for those shared benefits between all of our species. So although I am a zoologist, I don't actually spend that much time with animals. Some people, such as my mother, might actually comment I'm more of a pooologist, but that isn't a real title. So in actual fact, I am a microbiologist, but very much focusing on gut health and the microbiome. I am obviously very interested in animal poo. And before we dive into some of the really exciting One Medicine opportunities, I wanted to share some of the power of poo from across the animal kingdom. So we obviously use animal poo to fertilize our crops, and it is the foundation to many ecosystems and food chains. But I wanted to give some fun facts, such as the Humboldt penguin is the most frequent pooper in the world, averaging 6 to 8 times per hour. This is compared to sloths that actually only go to the toilet once a week. And in order for them to make that happen, they actually do a little dance in order to get everything moving. We've also got elephants, and actually their fecal samples are so fibrous that they are used to make paper. And even going back to World War One, we used to use guano, bat poo, to make our explosives. And so we know that the animal kingdom is diverse, and so is the microbiome. And what's fantastic in biology is that we do share the same parallels in terms of talking about taxonomy and the way that we describe species as well. And what I really want to do is view the microbiome more as a shared organ across species. So we see this co-evolution with humans and the bacteria, and this isn't just with our domestic animals, this is also seen in wild animals as well. And then we've got this co-development of the immune system thanks to the bacteria, and we even see this shared metabolism as well as this co-regulation. One of the really interesting areas at the moment is around that gut-brain axis as well. And having these shared biology means that we can have shared medicine. But what is the microbiome? This is a community of microorganisms. And the reason this is so important in terms of our evolution is that these organisms have existed long before us. Cyanobacteria evolved at least 2.4 billion years ago. There's so much bacteria. One of my favorite facts is there's actually more individual bacteria in your gut than there are stars in our entire galaxy. And when we have this shared biology, it means that this medicine can be shared as well. When we're talking about the microbiome, we're referring to this really diverse ecosystem. We talk about diversity in nature as well, and there being a diverse ecosystem. And I want you to take 3 woodlands as an example of these ecosystems. The first woodlands is very mature. And with that woodlands, you'd expect there to be lots of different types of trees that are equally balanced with each other. You might also have another form of woodlands, which is one type of tree, but all exactly the same tree. And with that, we would want to call that a very balanced ecosystem. The third type of tree, the third type of ecosystem is one where we would have lots of different individual types of trees. I would call this really rich, but they're maybe not well balanced with each other. So these are my examples of those different woodlands with those different abundances of trees, those different types of trees and how that could affect an ecosystem. The reason this is important is if we think about certain diseases, they're very specific to certain trees, such as that awful disease that came and wiped out so many of our conker trees across the UK. In woodlands that had a rich and balanced ecosystem, it wouldn't cause too much of an issue. Whereas if it was a woodland that was purely balanced and just had the conker tree, it would be wiped out and then you would be left with a very bare ecosystem. And this is the same for the gut microbiome. But instead of trees, you have bacteria, yeast, and viruses in that ecosystem. And just like with our woodlands, what we want is mature, well-established, rich, and balanced ecosystem. And this is what we consider to be really good diversity associated with good health outcomes. What has been discovered in human medicines is how important this microbiome is to so many different processes. It's not just immunity and digestion, but we've found these gut accesses across the body. So that gut-brain axis, we know that bacteria are able to produce precursors to things like serotonin, which is able to affect our general mood. And this is actually the same in animals as well. So when we talk about that microbiome, it is the community of organisms that is found together in an environment. And I talk a lot about the gut microbiome, but every location has a microbiome. Skin, feathers, soil, it is everywhere. And in terms of medicine, it is important for digestion and nutrition, but also metabolic disorders, overall immunity, and AMR and zoonotic disease as well. But what affects the microbiome? We split these into host or internal factors, things like our age, weight, genetics, medical history, stress levels, how much stress we can handle. But the most influential thing are these environmental factors, things that you can actually change. So diet, we know geographical location has a really big effect, even habitat type, climate, and lifestyle. Where does the microbiome come from? I've got an example here of three different mammals. So with humans, we are placental mammals, much like my example of the dingo. Our microbiome typically comes through a vaginal birth followed by lactation. We know in human medicine, babies that are born via cesarean, preterm babies, or babies that have need to have formula instead of breast milk are more likely to have eczema, asthma, and other allergies. And we see the exact same thing in the animal kingdom as well. But taking a couple of other examples, because this shows how important that early microbiome is for all animals' development. With most mammals, they will be getting it from that birthing process and lactation. If we take an egg-laying mammal, such as a platypus, and this is the same for all egg-laying mammals, if they have a cloaca, when they actually have the egg, there is some microbiome on the outside of the egg, so that when their babies hatch, they are still getting that initial transfer of the microbiome, mimicking what would be happening in those placental mammals. And then with marsupials, that obviously have a very short gestation period and have teeny tiny jelly bean looking babies. When they are lactating, the pouch microbiome, so the ecosystem of microorganisms in the pouch, completely changes during lactation. Again, showing how important it is for those very young animals to be able to have that initial bacteria and for their later development. But the easiest way for us to understand this medicine across species is looking at companion and domestic animals. This is because they have a shared environment. They have wonderful owners who are willing to share a lot of information with us. And in the cases of dogs, they also have very similar foods to us as well. We've seen from looking at the microbiome of both humans and dogs that we share an enormous amount. Even though we are genetically most similar to pigs and we do the most research on mice, when we look at that gut microbiome, it's actually humans and dogs that share the most similarities. And part of that is to do with our co-evolution. We've been evolving alongside each other for over 15,000 years. Dogs have evolved to eat a very similar diet to us, and as such have developed very similar diseases and patterns as what we see in human health. Companion animals give us this really, really good opportunity to look at the gut-brain axis. Many dogs can suffer with things like behavioral changes, anxiety, and aggression. We see very similar changes in the microbiome to dogs that are experiencing anxiety to humans who have depression. We see a loss of this microbial richness, a loss of bacteria, and we see the same thing in the dogs that are experiencing anxiety as well. And it is a bit of a chicken and an egg situation. We don't know if the microbiome changes first or the microbiome changes as a result of it, but it gives us this really clear marker for us to be able to investigate both that shared biology and also opportunities to benefit both species. There are already One Medicine microbiome targets that are currently being used. So at Biome 9, we've been looking at the microbiome and epilepsy. We know in human pediatric patients that adjusting the diet really helps to reduce the severity of seizures. And we've seen the same thing with dogs as well. We can see the same bacteria up and down regulated in both humans and dogs that are suffering with epilepsy. We see the exact same patterns in humans and dogs that have chronic enteropathies, such as ulcerative colitis and also irritable bowel disease. Even skin conditions like dermatitis are often linked to the gut microbiome in both humans and dogs. So these are already areas where we can be targeting if we aren't already. And speaking on that human dog co-evolution, canines, our pet dogs, have this thing called the AMY2B gene. This is an amylase gene. It allows us to be able to digest things like starches and carbohydrates. We have 20 copies of this gene. Wolves only have one copy of this gene. Our pet dogs also have 20 copies of the gene, just like we do. And this is a perfect example of how dogs have actually changed genetically to be able to be more aligned with us. There's a really good opportunity here to kind of understand this better with the current fox urbanization that we're seeing. Now they're eating more humans' foods, especially as scavengers. Are they also going to develop a more humanized microbiome? And is there going to be an opportunity for us in the future to help this species as well with the knowledge that we've already got? So One Medicine is very much already happening within the microbiome. There are microbiome therapeutics that are already approved in both species, such as number 3. This is used for both IBD and colitis, both in veterinary medicine and human medicine. Fecal microbiome transplantation is a very big topic. Obviously, this would be species specific. You'd never want to do an FMT between a dog and a human, but there are things that we can learn from the human FMT studies and the canine FMT studies and the similarities in some of those results and outputs, as well as using nutrition as an intervention. And instead of using a trial and error process, using the science of the microbiome to really validate what those changes are. And I think the most common way that we already are using One Medicine in terms of the microbiome is in infection and antimicrobial resistance. We know about the antibiotic link in both human and veterinary medicine. This is really well studied in companion animals and the humans that they share their houses with as well. But it's also helping us to inform alternatives to antibiotics, such as bacteriophage therapy. And so I do a lot of work with dogs, with companion canines. And this is a really big focus of my research. But I do think that there are opportunities for us to look across the animal kingdom. So first starting with some bird microbiomes. My PhD was focused on poultry, and poultry have also already been teaching us a lot when it comes to One Medicine and the microbiome. We learned back in the 70s of competitive exclusion. This is where we were able to protect the early life microbiome of chicks through a probiotic approach. Effectively, if you give loads and loads of really beneficial probiotics really early on in life to any animal, it's going to prevent pathogens, disease-causing bacteria from able to come into their body. This was really important in poultry for things like food safety. But we're also now using this competitive exclusion to help those preterm babies and to help those babies that need additional immune support at the start of their life. We've learned a lot about the consequences of antimicrobial growth promoters and the effect of antimicrobial resistance at a population scale. And this is where poultry are really essential for us. It's helped us to understand these microbiome changes across populations, as well as that insight to foodborne illnesses and the control of pathogens like Campylobacter and Salmonella, which do affect humans. But there are other birds that have really, really interesting microbiomes that could have potential for one medicine. I'm not sure how many birders are out there, but one of the ones that are on my lifer list is a hoopoe. Hoopos are given that name because that is the sound that they make, and they are quite rare birds for you to be able to see, but they are fairly common across Europe, and we occasionally get them in the UK. What birders will know is hoopos are not only distinctive for their name and their sound, but also for their smell. You can actually smell a hoopoe's nest from very, very far away. And that's because of a certain gland where they are actually secreting some microbial products, and they use this for preening, and they use this for their nest. And for a long time, scientists thought that this must be to deter predators and deter anything from coming into the nest. But actually, now that they've done more genomic research on the bacteria, they've found that it actually helps to protect their feathers. And what it's doing, it's preventing other bacteria from destroying the feathers and having a harmful effect on the nest. And other birds give us the opportunity to understand the effect of migration on the microbiome, and this affects the physical and health benefits of the birds. We see a lot of differences with starlings when they are in Africa compared to when they are in the UK. But it also affects selection in terms of breeding. In the common moorhen, they have this beautiful red face shield, and they find the redder the shield, the more microbial diversity in their gut. The bright red face shield is also something that a mate will select for as well during the breeding season. We know that that higher diversity is also linked to better immunity. Again, we've got that chicken and egg situation, but knowing that link between the microbiome, between immunity, and between these physiological differences that we can see between the birds, it's an opportunity for us to understand how that shared biology can also benefit the humans as well. Birds obviously give us some really, really good examples, but I think microbiome is so well conserved that we can even look down to an invertebrate level. Bumblebees are a really excellent model for understanding that gut-brain connection. Interesting fact about bumblebee poo, they don't actually poo until they reach adulthood. So as larvae, they have this blind gut. But bumblebees are fascinating for their behavior and for their social hierarchy. Bumblebees play, they are able to learn things. They are really complex animals, but they also have very similar microbiome succession to what we see in humans. And if you manipulate that microbiome succession, you see changes in their behavior, you see changes within their social hierarchies. And so bumblebees, that shows just how well conserved the microbiome is. There are other places where we're looking at microbiomes of invertebrates, but more in a one health than a one medicine aspect. But I think there are still great opportunities here for us. In microbiology, we've been replacing vertebrate in vivo models with things like the greater wax moth and also mealworm larvae. Because of these functions being so well preserved, it means that we can be using these invertebrates, meaning less of an ethical burden, as well as being more accessible for a lot of researchers to actually do in vivo studies as well. And even if we go further than invertebrates and actually look at a microfauna level, we still see the same fundamental functions. And this is essential for helping us understand that basic research with motility and energy, as well as there being novel bacteria metabolites that could have a benefit for our medicine. Mammals are clearly the most obvious opportunity for us. It's what we share the most biology with. And one of the areas I've been most fascinated in is in fasting and hibernating animals. In fasting and hibernating animals, they see a change in their microbiome, which switches to more nutrient recycling. What that enables is a reduction in muscle wastage, but also an improvement in metabolic function. This is really important in human medicine for diseases that affect muscle wastage, but also diseases that require people to be bedbound for a period of time. If we can understand what is occurring within those microbiomes and find a way to replicate that for human patients who are suffering with things like muscle wastage, this could be a huge opportunity. This also has a big opportunity to help facilitate long space travel as well, because this is a major concern for NASA when they're looking at long-term space travel, is actually muscle wastage. So I think there's an exciting opportunity there as well. Another key insight that we get from the microbiome from mammals is to do with coprophagy. So this is the practice of animals eating feces. Some animals eat other species as well as their own. And I mentioned this thing earlier on called fecal microbiome transplants. In human and animal medicine, what this happens in veterinary medicine and in humans is taking a fecal sample from a healthy donor and literally transplanting that into a patient that is suffering with a specific issue. On the NHS, this is typically used to treat recurrent Clostridium difficile infections. And in dogs, it's typically used to treat chronic enteropathy. So those dogs that have been experiencing consistent diarrhea for more than 3 weeks that haven't been able to have it fixed. What we see in the animal kingdom is that this is routinely practiced by animals. So in koalas, it's a great example because the babies actually have to eat their mother's feces in order for them to be able to get used to the toxins of their main diet of eucalyptus leaves. So it's really essential actually for them. With the Brandt's vole, so this is a specific type of vole where coprophagy is really important to their entire lifestyle. When a population was prevented from practicing coprophagy, this reduced their energy, it made them less social, and it also created a imbalance within their microbiome, affecting their digestion as well. So actually, for that mammal, it's been really essential for stabilizing their microbiome. So again, we can be learning from this fecal microbiome transplant from the biology of it and how we're using this in medicine. Some of the things we're exploring in humans at the moment is using fecal microbiome transplant to help with some neurological conditions, such as Parkinson's disease and also Alzheimer's and dementia as well, after seeing really successful results in mice. And then to finish with another section of life is marine life. Marine life gives us an opportunity to look at one medicine at a biochemical level. A lot of what we have learned about the microbiome, the techniques that we use, the technologies that we use, actually originated from looking at the ocean microbiome. One of the most important microbiomes across the ocean and marine microbiomes is whales. So the ocean microbiome actually accounts for 2/3 of all ocean biomass. And whale feces, particularly, is so important that researchers have started to create a fake version of the feces and scattering that around the sea to try and boost the ecosystems. But one of my all-time favorite facts when it comes to bacteria is to do with the anglerfish. So you might know the anglerfish from Finding Nemo. It's a very deep sea fish and has a large luminescent light on the front of it. The bioluminescent light actually comes from the bacteria that is living on the fish. It doesn't come from the fish itself. And I just think this is a really exciting example of that biology that the bacteria have, even though it might not be shared for us. And I've spoken a lot about the bacteria, but that is just one part of this microbiome, one part of that ecosystem. Viruses and virus-like particles, such as bacteriophages, are already being used as an alternative to antibiotics in dogs to treat recurrent ear infections and also in some pediatric cases as well. Eukaryotes are also really important, thinking about the yeast, the fungi, but even the nematodes as well, and the effect that has. And then very little research is also done on archaea. And the only reason for that is because so far we've never found a disease causing archaea. And so very little funding is actually given to that. But I think it's always good to look at that entire ecosystem as a whole. And so in terms of those lessons and insights from the microbiome, I think one medicine is already in action. We've got that shared biology enabling more shared medicine. And we already know that with those naturally occurring diseases, it really helps us to accelerate our understanding. So it goes show one medicine really is just happening because microbes and disease don't respect species boundaries. That gives us this fantastic chance to be understanding the diseases in both animals as well as humans for those shared benefits.